Hello. So, Genesis chapter 3, we got down to verse 6 on Saturday, and we hit, I think, that quintessential teaching of the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. 1 John 2:16, which we see here. The food was the tree of good of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The fruit on it was good for food, the flesh, pleasant to the eyes, and desirable to make one wise, the pride of life. So it says that she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So we see her give it to her husband. She gives it to Adam, and Adam eats of the tree too. Now, I don't know. Is that enough to go on today? Maybe. Because here's the deal, is that throughout the New Testament, you're never again going to read about Eve. Well, you'll read about her being deceived, I guess. But you won't read about Eve eating the fruit. You read about Adam eating the fruit. You could go through Romans, and in Romans it makes it very clear to us that in Adam, all have died. See, that's the idea, is that it's because of Adam. And in Romans chapter 5, therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. And so again, it talks about, that was verse 12 of Romans 5. Verse 14, it talks about the transgression of Adam. All right? And then in 1 Timothy chapter 2, flip over there. 1 Timothy chapter 2, it says, for Adam was formed first in verse 13, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Now, what we read about here, though, is an interesting concept that you see, although Eve was deceived by Satan, Adam was held responsible. Why? Well, once again, we get back to our gender roles. We get back to the way God, men and women, and the concept of the man being the head of the house. She got deceived. Why did she get deceived? Well, one good possibility. Remember, we looked at how she was kind of off on what God had said about the tree. She says, you shall not touch it. Did she make that up? Or is that what her husband taught her? Remember, she wasn't there in chapter 2, verses 16 and 17, where God commands Adam not to eat of the tree. So at some point, it was Adam's responsibility to pass that information on to his wife. Did he? Or did he not? When she makes the comments, where she downplays God's goodness and she downplays God's judgment, she doesn't mention that it's every tree that you can eat freely. She omits that when she talks to Satan. That you shall surely die. She admits the surely part. Was that her omissions? Or was it Adam's? Did Adam improperly teach his wife? You see, in Adam, all die. Not in Eve. It's in Adam. She was deceived. And yet when Adam took of that fruit, he was held responsible for his actions. And that passed on to all mankind. There's something in this, which is the fact that as the head of the household, you see, women, they're supposed to be submissive to their own husbands. And yet, sometimes maybe it's overlooked the type of responsibility that is expected by God of that husband. Yes, wives should be submissive to their husbands, but husbands need to realize if they put all submission unto you, that means the buck stops with you, and you are fully responsible for the actions of the entire family. You are the father, you are the husband. Everything falls on you. And it's a burden, but it's a responsibility given by God. I think it was Sandy Adams I once heard talk about how some man was complaining about his marriage. He says, well, we've been married 10 years. And I'll tell you what, she is just miserable to be with. She's grumpy. She complains. She's lazy. And Sandy said, well, was she like that way when you married her? And he said, no. Well, what was she like when you married her? I was like, well, she was kind and she was helpful and she was just so loving and caring and she respected me. And so Sandy said, so let me get this straight then. 10 years ago, God put a woman under your care and responsibility for you to wash in the water of the word and for you to build up and edify and grow. And you've ruined her? In 10 years, you've brought her this low? And there's an irony to that because it's true that yes, husbands, wash your wives with the water of the word, that no one hates his own body but loves it. And so too a man must love his wife and cherish her and lift her up. And so this is kind of the two-edged sword we have here. Is that, Eve ate of the fruit, but she gave it to Adam, and Adam was held responsible for the whole thing. The fact that she was alone with the devil in the first place, Adam's fault. The fact that she didn't have the proper training and encouragement, that was Adam's fault. The fact that mankind fell to sin is Adam's fault. That's a lot to put on Adam. Yes, it is. And that is God's responsibility for men. Happy Father's Day. Belated, it's a day off now. But that's the reality of it. And so, some of the husbands here who've maybe gone through pre-marriage counseling with me, I forewarn them. I say, when you two come back to me, husband, I'm going to tell you and remind you what I told you during pre-marriage counseling. It's always going to be your fault. Wow, it's always my fault. That's so hard and heavy. Yeah, it's always going to be your fault. Because it all falls on Jesus. All our sins fall on Jesus. And all her sins are going to fall on you. Are you caring for her? Are you sacrificing for her? Are you sacrificing everything for her? That's your responsibility. That's the expectation for the husband. And so, yes, society has been led and directed and whatnot by men for generations. And it's been common for men to subjugate, to put women under, and to take away rights and things like that from women. And so verses like, wives, be submissive to your husbands have been abused. But when we get a biblical concept of both sides, of what the expectations and responsibilities are for men and women, for wives and for husbands, it makes the whole picture make more sense. And so, yes, because there is supposed to be a picture of Christ and his church, of him and us in marriage. We are all the bride. What are we supposed to do? Love him, serve him, come underneath his direction and his guidance. And Christ makes it a whole lot easier than most husbands do because he's perfect. But sadly, imperfect husbands get stuck with imperfect brides. And imperfect brides get stuck underneath an imperfect husband. But just because we're full of sin and not perfect doesn't mean we need to throw out God's plan. Husbands, men, the buck stops at you. It is your responsibility to lead your wife. It's your responsibility to forsake all for the sake of her. Christ, God Almighty, stepped down out of heaven, put on a package of flesh, and lived amongst sinful man in order to save us. What are you willing to do for your wife? Now, before I end, I will very clearly and concisely say it is much easier for me to preach this than it is for me to do this. Sometimes I might sound like I do everything I say, but that wouldn't be true because, once again, we're all in these packages of flesh, and there's a war that goes on within me the law of my flesh, the law of sin, and then the law of the Spirit, and they war against each other. And we read about this from Paul. Paul was very transparent. That's what I love about Paul. He speaks of his own struggles and knowing that there's this, I know what I ought to do and I know what I want to do, and they always do this with each other. And ladies, I'm sure it's the same for you. I think I laid the heavier hammer on the guys today, but once again, you look at 1 Peter chapter 3, where it talks about wives submitting to their husbands, and even if their husband isn't a believer, having a godly reverence for him so that the husband might be won without a word. It's mind-blowing. That's like a faith thing to be able to do something like that. So we made it through a half a verse today, but it was good stuff. Once again, Eve gave the fruit to Adam. Adam ate of it, and he was responsible for the whole thing because that was his God-given role, whether he liked it or not. Men, let's be men. Let's do it. Women, be women. In the confusing age we live in, we need men and women who are proud to be men and proud to be women. We don't need to rub it in people's faces, and we don't really need to tear down people who are already confused about the subject. That'll probably just confuse them even more, push them away. But we need to be examples of what a godly man and a godly woman looks like. And I do believe when people see, when I see men who are like real men, manly men, Atticus Finch men, it makes me want to be a man. And when you see a real spiritual woman who's just hitting home runs, being that godly wife, I think of people like Kay Smith and of Jean McClure, two godly women, and it's just like, wow, I can only imagine, like, those are women that if I was a woman, I would strive to want to be more like. So yeah, be a man, be a woman, to give this world an example of what they ought to be striving for. All right, God bless you guys. Have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Adios. Hitting the off button now. Always got to stall for the people who are lag behind on the live. You're welcome, Marla. Right, I've almost clicked it now. All these people keep clicking like, so it's like my pride. It just makes me want to stay here and watch. One more like and I'll click off. Now they're gone now, I guess. It doesn't say they're gone. Are they actually watching me? Aha, there's my last like. Bye. Ooh, 2 likes. Ooh, now I want to stay. No, gotta go.